Today we have a little bit of a different video. I actually am going to be ranking all of my Natasha Denona midi size palettes. Now, technically that's a lie. This one is not considered a midi palette. However, since the pan sizes are the same, I feel like it counts. So I'm going to get to it here. I'll let you know which ones I have to start out, and then we'll rank them and I'll talk about my pros and cons. So, as we talked about, we have the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. We have the Yucca palette. We have the Retro. We have the Love. We have the My Dream palette. We have the Pastel palette. I don't know why I say it like that, but we have the Retro Glam. We have the Zendo. We have the Sunrise. And last but probably not least, we have the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palettes. All 10 are here, and I will have a ranking in a moment. Okay, so I am back, and I have ranked these in order from least to best, in my opinion. So before we even get started, this is all very subjective. This is just my opinion based on how I do my makeup, yada yada, all those things. If you like something that I don't like, I love that for you. I 100% think that's amazing. For me, however, these are all just things that did not work for me. They're things that I have tried or things that I got like on a super sale or thought would work better for me and then didn't. Now, I think makeup is meant to be fun. I think it's meant to be personal. It's all very subjective. So again, if something works great for you, I love that for you. But I want to hear about it in the comments. If you love one of my least favorite ones, please tell me how. How does it work for you and not for me? So at the number 10 spot, we have the Retro palette. And in fact, I'm actually going to be decluttering this palette. I've given it enough chances. It just has not worked for me. This is what the inside looks like. Now, this palette, I've seen people make beautiful, stunning looks with it. And I just can't. The colors don't look right on me. They pull very like bruisish. They just don't look quite right. Some people say this is their like absolute favorite Natasha Denona palette. And again, I love that for you. But I'm actually going to be decluttering this in my Mercari shop. Hopefully it will go to a good home. Okay, in the number 9 spot, we have the Retro Glam palette. This is one that I believe I got on sale for like $20 or something crazy low. And if you can tell, I have actually yet to use this one. Now, why is that? Why do you have something in your collection that you have yet to use? And it's because when I look at the layout of this palette, it makes no sense to me. When I look at like this color and this color, they're too similar. I don't really know what's going on. When I look at like the minty greens, like I don't really know what to do with them. So this is one I'm on the fence about decluttering. I might declutter it, but what I'm really thinking about doing is actually rearranging it to where it'll make a little more sense to my eye. It just feels very haphazard, I guess. So I probably will use this one in the spring as a part of my like springtime use what you have project. But until then, it's gotta wait, and I will decide what to do with it. Next up, in the number 8 spot, 1098 spot, we have the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. This one, I want to love it so much. It's really pretty, but the only deep shade is this shade called Silhouette, which is fine, but there's like a couple of shades that are really similar to one another. These two specifically are very similar. Even the shade Tender is not that different. Now, I have used it a few times, and I do really love the shimmers in here. I get compliments on this palette whenever I wear it. It's just a little too light for my taste. I do like a light look every now and again, but it's not one that I reach for very often. So that's why it's number 8. Again, none of these are bad quality. It's just why it doesn't work for me. So, number 7, we have the Sunrise palette. This one is a very pretty palette. I really do. Oh, try not to blind you there. This one is a really pretty palette. As you can see, like it's seen some use. It's seen some things, especially the shimmers. But here's the thing. I forget that I have this palette all the time. Every time I see it in my little like makeup drawer, I'm like, oh, what palette is that? Oh yeah, it's the Sunrise palette. So this is one that I really do enjoy when I do remember that I have it. I feel like the colors in it are unique in my collection. I don't have a lot of reds. I do like a gold and kind of orange moment. It's very pretty, but again, not super memorable. So that docks it some points. Next up at the number 6 spot, we have the Metropolis palette. When I tell you, I was obsessed with getting this palette. Obsessed. I missed out on it when it was new. I ended up getting a like new one on Mercari for a really good price. Here it is. Now, the thing that I love about it is that when I see this, I feel inspired. I feel like, I could do something grungy green. I could do a nice brown. I could do some oranges. What docks it so many points is I do feel like you could condense this down into one of the 15 pan palettes. I really do feel like you could. Now, will I do that someday? Maybe. I might. But until then, this one kind of gets docked points because a lot of the shades can be very similar. Like these browns and like kind of oranges up here all look so similar on the eye that it docks it some points. Now, is it beautiful? Yes, absolutely. Love, love, love it. However, I don't think it's worth the initial price tag. I don't love that some of the colors do kind of dupe themselves in the palette. So that's why it didn't quite crack the top 5. So the top 5. In at number 5, we have the Love palette. I am a sucker for a pink palette. And this shade is barely pink. It's got some reds, it's got some pinks, it's got some purple. I still, to this day, don't know how to incorporate this like silver in here. It boggles my mind every time I see it. Now, I do like the quality of this palette. I don't reach for it as much as I should. But with the Roxa or Rosha palette coming, I mean, what? What? With that palette coming to my collection at some point, I think this will be a nice companion palette to that one. This is a palette that I pull out usually in like the winter time. Not quite Valentine's Day, even though I'm sure that's what it's meant to be. But I just really love it in like the winter when I'm looking for something a little more cozy. Now, number 4. This is one that when it initially launched, I was like, nope, that's not for me. This is the My Dream palette. And here's what it looks like on the inside. Now, when I tell you, I have made amazing date night looks with this palette. This is my go-to when it's like, hey, it's date night. I need a look that I know is going to like for sure hit. It's going to be easy to make. This is the palette that I go for, hands down. Like, especially the shade Vision. It's like baby's first multichrome, but it is a multichrome. And then the shade Thrill is also one of my favorites. I do like Edgy as a liner. That's really fun. Or it's got like a nice deep black. Even the shade Invention, really, really fun. So this is one that I love for sentimental purposes. I also love it as like a date night palette. There's just a lot that you can do with it, but it is a lot of like deeper shades. So a lot of more like smoky looks. This one and the I Need a Nude are actually really good companion palettes. Like if you want to deepen up the I Need a Nude, I really recommend the My Dream because this one leans a little darker, whereas the I Need a Nude leans a little lighter. Speaking of lighter palettes, at the top 3, we have the pastel palette. I love, 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 love this palette. Can't get enough of it. In the spring, whenever, I just love it. Now, do I use it a lot? No. Every time I use it, I enjoy it though. The shade Limoncello and Mint Frost are actually from the Tropic palette, so from the large Tropic palette. But the shade Duet and Dainty and even Bora, they're all just so wonderful and they call to me so much. I know a lot of people don't love this color story. They think it's a little too light, but it is a pastel palette. You kind of get what it says on the tin. But again, it's a really good sister palette. But for me, I do use this one on its own a lot. A lot in the spring and summer, really whenever I want just like a light, colorful look. Now, can we guess what's in my top 2? I kind of showed you a little bit. So the top 2 are probably going to be a little, let's say, contentious. So number 2 is the Yucca palette. I love a swampy, warm, green, mustard color story. This shade Camu Camu is unlike anything I have in my collection. I love, love, love it. I love the shade Willow as a liner. I love all of the shimmers in here. It's just wonderful. Now, I will say, Tipu and Akasha are very close to the same color. Very, very close. But that aside, this is one of my favorite palettes of all time. Like if I lost all of my makeup, I would want to replace this. That's how much I love it. Yeah, it's so great. I'll probably pull this one out in my summer box of quarterly makeup. I really like it. Like it's a good summer to fall palette. So there's my 3 and then 2 and then we'll put number 1 here. So This one is probably going to upset some people if you're a big Natasha Denona fan and you haven't clicked off by now by me saying Metropolis was just kind of okay. Hear me out. Number one is the Zendo palette. Now, before you go, before you click off, before you leave, hear me out. So, this palette was my very first Natasha Denona palette. Now, aside from nostalgia, I do like that there's a lot you can do with this palette. You can really lean into the blues if you want to. I've done beautiful peach looks with it. The shade Zeal is a beautiful liner. Now, I hear you. I see you. It doesn't match the mini palette. I never owned the mini palette. It doesn't make any sense with the cool tones and the warm tones. I hear that. I understand you. I see you. But I don't care. I wholeheartedly love this palette and I will not apologize. The looks that I make with it make me happy every single time. If you want, you can think of this palette. It's actually a nice way to think about it is in rows of 3. So if you do these 3, it's a beautiful little color story there. If you do these 3, beautiful color story, beautiful color story. Now, here's where it gets crazy. Hear me out. You could do these 3. You could do these 3. Or if you're feeling really adventurous, these 3, and these 3 all together. So these 3, and these 3 all together. I know that sounds crazy. I know that this is kind of in a similar vein to the retro glam palette in that it's one that, like the color story doesn't make sense to me. This one makes sense to me. This one makes me happy. This one sparks joy. Because when I see these nice warm tones, I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm getting into, and I know that I'm going to love it. So for me, that's my Natasha Denona top 10. Now, I do have my eye on the Rocha or Roxa palette and the Xenon palette, believe it or not. For me, as someone who loves warm tones, it does feel kind of crazy that I really want to get the Xenon palette, but here we are. So to show you my ranking again, I'm going to put them in order. The Zendo palette. Then we had Yucca. Then we had Pastel. My Dream. Love. Metropolis. Sunrise. I Need a Nude. Retro Glam. And the Retro palette. That's my top 10 of my Natasha Denona MIDI palettes. Now, some of these might be getting decluttered, looking at you, retro palette, but in general, I do love them. These palettes definitely spark joy. I am happy to have them in my collection, and I look forward to using them in future videos. But that's all that I have for now. Thank you for visiting and hearing me discuss eyeshadow palettes. I do appreciate it. Have a good night. Bye.